Hello, my name is Lorena Mendoza, and today we're going to talk about these three pivotal fields of literary theory: structuralism, narratology, and postcolonialism. Let's begin with structuralism. Structuralism, originating in France in the 1950s, posits that phenomena are best understood not in isolation, but within the context of larger underlying structures. These structures are conceptual frameworks imposed by human perception, meaning that significance is attributed to things by the mind, rather than being an inherent essence. For literary analysis, this means moving beyond individual texts to consider the broader systems like genre or literary conventions that contain them. The foundational ideas for structuralism come from Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure emphasized that the word meanings are arbitrary and maintained by convention. Crucially, he argued that meanings are relational, defined by their differences from other words in a system, famously stating, "In a language, there are only differences without fixed terms." He also proposed that language constitutes a world, rather than merely reflecting it. His distinction between language system, and parole, individual utterances, provided a model for analyzing individual works, parole, within a larger literary system, lang. Anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss applied this structuralist view to myths, analyzing individual tales within broader cycles to identify recurrent patterns and fundamental binary oppositions. Roland Barthes extended this approach to modern culture, analyzing diverse phenomena to uncover underlying structures of values and beliefs. Structuralist critics analyze prose narratives by relating them to larger structures, such as literary genres, intertextual connections, or universal narrative models. Barthes' work, particularly his analysis in S/Z, exemplifies this. He breaks down narratives into lexias and categorizes them using 5 codes that he sees as generating all possible narratives: proeretic code, actions; hermeneutic code, enigmas and suspense; cultural code, references to common knowledge; semicode, linked to characterization and theme on a smaller scale; and symbolic code, broader thematic contrasts and binary oppositions, like life art, male, female. Next, we explore narratology. Narratology is a systematic study of narrative structures, aiming to understand the nature of story itself as a concept and cultural practice. A core distinction in narratology is between story, the chronological sequence of events as they happen, and plot, how those events are edited, ordered, and presented in the narrative. The plot encompasses elements like style, viewpoint, pace, and can involve flashbacks and flash-forwards. Key figures include Aristotle. In his Poetics, he identified essential plot elements: hamartia, a fault; anagnorisis, recognition; and peripeteia, reversal of fortune, revealing underlying themes and moral purposes. On the other hand, we have Vladimir Propp. This Russian formalist, in the morphology of the folk tale, identified 31 functions, possible actions, that construct Russian folk tales, always occurring in a fixed order. He also proposed 7 spheres of action, characters' roles like villain or hero, highlighting the subordination of character to action. Let's move to Gerard Genette. His work focuses on how a story is told. Key concepts from his narrative discourse include mimesis versus diegesis, showing mimetic dramatic scenes with dialogue versus telling diegetic rapid summaries. Focalization, the viewpoint or perspective from which the story is told, for example, external, internal, or zero focalization, omniscient narration. Narrator types: covert, effaced, non-intrusive voice versus overt, distinct character. Overt narrators can be heterodiegetic, outsider, or homodiegetic, character in their own story. Time, use of analepses, flashbacks, and prolepses, flash-forwards. Narrative packaging, frame narratives containing embedded narratives, meta-narratives, which can be single-ended, double-ended, or intrusive. Narratological analysis helps us understand how stories are designed and what their basic mechanisms are. By distinguishing between the story, the actual sequence of events, and the plot, their ordered presentation, critics can analyze how chronology is manipulated through techniques like analepses, flashbacks, and prolepses, flash-forwards, to create suspense or thematic resonance. The study of focalization reveals whose point of view frames the narrative, whether it's an external, internal, or omniscient perspective. Analyzing narrator types, covert versus overt, homodiegetic versus heterodiegetic, sheds light on the reliability and voice present in the events. Furthermore, understanding narrative packaging, like frame narratives and embedded stories, allows critics to explore how narratives are layered and how these structures create specific effects or reflect thematic concerns. This practical application shifts focus to the mechanics of storytelling, demonstrating how technical choices shape the reader's experience and interpretation. Finally, we turn to postcolonialism. Postcolonial criticism analyzes the cultural dimensions of colonialism and imperialism, emerging alongside Third World liberation struggles, for example, Indian independence, and drawing on post-structuralist ideas. It highlights power imbalances between Western and non-Western culture, arguing that the Western values and literature have historically dominated and marginalized non-Western traditions, often exhibiting a repressive ethnocentrism. Postcolonialism aims to dismantle the imperialist subject and assert denied subjectivities, addressing how meaning is constructed in a world shaped by colonial legacies. A crucial question it grapples with is whether post signifies a true break from colonialism or its continuation as neo-colonialism. Representatives of postcolonialism. First, we have Edward Said. A principal influence, Said's Orientalism in 1978 exposed Orientalism as a constructed imaginative geography and a system of images and stereotypes that allowed the West to dominate the Orient as the other. Said extended Foucault's analysis of discourse as power to show how cultural representations function in the construction of First-Third World relations. He advocated for a critical decentered consciousness and interdisciplinarity to dismantle systems of domination, emphasizing the worldliness of texts, their deep connection to real-world power structures. Now Spivak. Spivak rigorously applies the construction, Marxism, and feminism. She investigates how truth is constructed and how individuals are complicit with what she is so carefully and cleanly opposing. Her pivotal concept is the subaltern, the colonized non-elite who in her famous formulation cannot speak without ceasing to be that named subject under neo-colonialism, highlighting the inherent impasse in representing the oppressed. Finally, Baba explores the experience of social marginality through concepts like colonial ambivalence and hybridity. He argues that the colonial project, in seeking to create mimic men, who are almost the same but not quite, and later almost the same but not white, inadvertently exposes the strategic failure of colonial authority. Baba's hybridity reverses the colonial disavowal of difference, allowing denied knowledges to enter the dominant discourse and form a third space of enunciation for counter-colonial resistance. Postcolonial critics analyze texts to expose power dynamics and colonial legacies. Concepts like mimicry and hybridity reveal colonial discourse flaws and enable counter-colonial resistance. The goal is to dismantle ethnocentric views and validate diverse cultural expressions.